The quiet strength of kindness. The sun cast a warm glow over the city streets, but the air held the crispness of early autumn. Mary adjusted her worn but clean cardigan as she held Liam's small hand in hers. At just 8 years old, her grandson had already learned the quiet struggles of life, but he still carried the bright curiosity of childhood in his sparkling eyes. His grip tightened around her fingers as they approached the grocery store, his excitement clear despite the simplicity of their errand. Inside, the store was alive with the hum of conversation, the beeping of cash registers, and the occasional chatter of employees stocking shelves. The towering displays of goods fascinated Liam, but Mary's focus remained on their shopping list. Every item had to be carefully considered, every coin accounted for. Her pension barely covered the essentials, and with Liam's growing needs, there was little room for extras. She carefully selected a small bag of rice, a loaf of bread, and a carton of milk, placing them gently in their cart. They moved through the aisles, pausing when Liam's gaze landed on a bright blue and white package, a box of chocolate cookies. His face lit up with a hopeful smile, his fingers hovering near the package, but never reaching out to grab it. Mary's chest tightened at the sight. That particular brand had been her daughter Emily's favorite. She used to buy them for Liam whenever they went shopping, always sneaking a cookie into his school lunch as a surprise. But Emily was gone. It had been 2 years since the accident. 2 years since Mary had taken on the full responsibility of raising her grandson alone. There was no space in their budget for treats, not today. She placed a gentle hand on Liam's shoulder. "Maybe next time, sweetheart," she said with a soft smile. Liam nodded, quickly masking his disappointment with a brave grin. "Okay, Grandma." They walked toward the checkout line, joining a queue that moved steadily forward. Mary reached into her purse and pulled out a small cloth bag filled with carefully counted coins. This was all she had, collected from her pension, and a few odd jobs she managed to pick up. When their turn came, she began placing the items onto the counter, her movements steady despite the awareness of the people waiting behind her. The cashier, a young woman with perfectly manicured nails and a name tag that read Jessica, gave an exaggerated sigh. She barely glanced at Mary before scanning the items with practiced speed. "That'll be $11.73, Jessica said, her tone bored. Mary nodded and opened her cloth bag, slowly counting out the change. Jessica's eyes flickered to the coins with barely concealed disdain. "You're paying with this," she scoffed loudly, making sure the people behind them could hear. "Seriously." Mary's fingers hesitated, but she continued counting. She wasn't ashamed. She had worked hard for every penny, but the stares of those around her made her stomach tighten. Jessica clicked her tongue. "People like you hold up the line for everyone else." Liam looked up at his grandmother, his small face twisting with concern. He didn't fully understand the situation, but he knew something wasn't right. Mary ignored the murmurs around her and pushed forward. "I have the exact amount," she said quietly, placing the last few coins on the counter. Jessica rolled her eyes. "Next time, just use a card like normal people," she muttered under her breath, scooping up the coins with clear irritation. Mary felt the heat of humiliation creeping up her neck, but before she could respond, a deep, steady voice cut through the tension. "I don't think that was necessary." The room seemed to hush. Jessica blinked, turning toward the source of the voice. Standing behind Mary was a man dressed simply in a black jacket, jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He had remained unnoticed in the crowd, but now his presence was impossible to ignore. Jessica's eyes widened as recognition dawned. It was Keanu Reeves. A murmur spread through the line. A few people gasped, whispering his name in disbelief. Keanu's gaze was steady, his expression unreadable. He looked at Mary, then at Liam, before his sharp eyes settled back on Jessica. "I believe she was paying just fine," he said, his voice calm but firm. "No need to humiliate her." Jessica's face flushed red, but she opened her mouth, searching for a defense. I wasn't. But Keanu wasn't done. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a crisp $100 bill, and placed it on the counter. This should cover her groceries. Mary gasped, her hands trembling. Oh no, that's too much. Keanu shook his head gently, his expression kind. It's my treat. You shouldn't have to feel embarrassed for buying food. Jessica hesitated before picking up the bill, her entire demeanor shifting. Of course. Let me. She fumbled with the register, clearly shaken. Keanu then crouched slightly, his gaze meeting Liam's. Hey, kid, he said with a warm smile. What's your favorite cookie? Liam's eyes widened. The blue and white one. He whispered, barely believing what was happening. Keanu turned back to the shelves, grabbed the exact box of chocolate cookies Liam had wanted, and placed it on the counter. Add this, too. Mary's eyes filled with tears. You don't have to do this. Keanu met her gaze with quiet sincerity. I want to. The people around them, once impatient and uninterested, now watched in awe. A few whispered about his kindness. A mother holding her toddler smiled at Mary. An older man at the back of the line gave a nod of respect. Jessica, now visibly flustered, quickly bagged the groceries and handed them over with an awkward, "Have a nice day." Keanu took the bags and handed them to Mary. You take care, he said gently. Mary swallowed past the lump in her throat, gripping Liam's hand as she held the groceries close. Thank you. Truly. Keanu only smiled. It was my pleasure. As Mary and Liam stepped outside into the fresh air, Liam squeezed her hand. Grandma, that was so cool. Mary chuckled, brushing away a tear. Yes, sweetheart. It really was. But inside the store, Keanu wasn't quite done. He turned back to Jessica, his gaze unwavering. Treat people with kindness, he said softly but firmly. You never know what they're going through. Jessica looked away, shame washing over her features. And with that, Keanu walked out, leaving behind a lesson no one in that store would soon forget. A ripple of kindness. Mary and Liam stepped out into the bright afternoon, the weight of the moment still lingering in the air. The grocery bags in her hands felt heavier, not because of their contents, but because of the overwhelming emotions swirling inside her. Humiliation, gratitude, and relief all mixed together, leaving her breathless. She stole a glance at her grandson, who was practically bouncing beside her, his small hands gripping the box of cookies Keanu Reeves had bought him. Grandma, did you see that? Liam's voice was filled with excitement. That was Keanu Reeves. He's in the movies. He's like a real-life superhero. Mary chuckled, despite the moisture gathering in her eyes. Yes, sweetheart, I saw. And he was very kind. Liam's face lit up. Do you think he helps people all the time? Mary thought for a moment. I think kindness is part of who he is, just like how we try to help others when we can. Liam beamed, holding the cookie box close like it was a treasured possession. Then I want to be like him too. Mary felt warmth spread in her heart. If nothing else, today had been a lesson, not just for her, but for Liam. A reminder that kindness, no matter how small, could change the course of someone's day. But as they walked home, she couldn't shake off the lingering shame of being treated so poorly. No one had stepped in to help, except Keanu. Did people really care so little about others these days? Meanwhile, inside the store, Jessica stood frozen behind the register, her hands gripping the edge of the counter as customers whispered among themselves. The humiliation she had tried to inflict on Mary had turned back on her tenfold. She had never felt so exposed, so ashamed. The store manager, a stout man named Greg, walked over, his brows furrowed. Jessica, my office. Now. Her stomach dropped. She cast a glance around, but no one met her eyes. They had all seen what had happened. They had seen Keanu Reeves put her in her place, and now she had to face the consequences. Inside the manager's office, the air was thick with disappointment. Greg leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "What were you thinking?" Jessica opened her mouth but quickly closed it. "You humiliated a grandmother in front of her grandson," Greg continued, shaking his head. "And it took Keanu Reeves stepping in for you to realize how awful you were being." Jessica swallowed. I didn't mean." Greg raised a hand. "I don't want to hear excuses. I'm putting you on suspension, effective immediately." Jessica's eyes widened. "Wait, what?" "You need to take some time and think about the kind of person you want to be," Greg said firmly. "Because if that's how you treat customers, then maybe you don't belong here." Jessica wanted to argue, but deep down, she knew she had no defense. She had been cruel, and the worst part, she hadn't even realized how much until it was too late. As she left the office, she felt the stares of the remaining customers. She ducked her head and quickly exited through the employee door. Outside, she leaned against the cold brick wall, taking deep, shaky breaths. For the first time in years, she felt truly small. Keanu's next stop. Keanu Reeves hadn't left the area just yet. After exiting the store, he slipped his hands into his pockets and observed Mary and Liam from a distance. They had no idea he was still nearby, but he watched as Liam chattered excitedly, holding his cookies like the greatest gift in the world. Keanu smiled. He had seen too many moments like that. Too many instances where people were mistreated simply for not having money, for being different, for being inconvenient to someone else. And yet, no one ever spoke up. Today, he had. But what about the people who weren't lucky enough to have someone stand up for them? With a determined nod, Keanu pulled out his phone and sent a quick message to a close friend, someone who could help make a real difference. Because today wasn't just about helping one person. It was about starting something bigger. An unexpected visitor. Back at Mary's modest apartment, she unpacked the groceries while Liam sat at the kitchen table, munching on a cookie. "These are the best ever," he declared, crumbs dusting his fingers. Mary smiled softly. "I'm glad, sweetheart." A knock at the door interrupted their moment. Frowning, Mary wiped her hands and walked over, unlocking the door. And there, standing in her doorway, was Keanu Reeves. Her breath hitched. "Oh my goodness." Liam gasped, practically falling out of his chair. "Whoa, are you here?" Keanu chuckled. "Yeah, I am." He held up a small bag. "I just wanted to stop by and check on you too. And well," he handed the bag to Mary. "A little extra for you." Mary took it hesitantly and peeked inside. More groceries, more essentials, more things she couldn't afford but desperately needed. Tears welled in her eyes. "You didn't have to do this." Keanu shrugged. "I wanted to." Liam launched forward and wrapped his arms around Keanu's waist in a tight hug. "You're the best." Keanu laughed, patting the boy's back. "You're a good kid, you know that." Mary wiped her tears. "I don't know how to thank you." "Just pay it forward," Keanu said simply. "Whenever you can, in whatever way you can." Mary nodded, her heart swelling with emotion. And in that moment, she knew. Kindness was never wasted. It always found a way to come back around. The power of a simple act. The sun had begun its slow descent, casting a golden hue over the modest apartment as Mary sat at the small kitchen table. Her fingers traced the edge of the bag Keanu had brought, her heart swelling with gratitude. Liam, still filled with excitement, happily munched on another cookie, his legs swinging beneath the chair. His eyes sparkled as he looked at Keanu, who had taken a seat across from them. His posture relaxed, yet there was a quiet intensity in his gaze. "Grandma, can you believe it? Keanu Reeves is in our house," Liam said, nearly bouncing in his seat. Keanu chuckled, his warm smile putting them both at ease. "I hope I'm not intruding. I just wanted to make sure you both were okay after what happened at the store." Mary blinked back, the emotions threatening to rise again. "You've already done more than enough, Mr. Reeves." "Keanu," he corrected gently. "And kindness doesn't have a limit. If you can help, you help." That's how I see it. Mary nodded, pressing her lips together as she tried to steady her voice. I was just embarrassed, I suppose. I've never had much, but I always made do. When Jessica treated me that way, it felt like I was being told I didn't belong. Keanu's expression darkened slightly, not with anger, but with understanding. He leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. You do belong, Mary. Don't ever let anyone make you feel otherwise. Some people forget that life isn't the same for everyone. You were paying for your food with your money. No one had the right to shame you for that. Liam tilted his head. Do people treat you bad too, Mr. Keanu? Keanu smiled softly, his eyes thoughtful. Not in the same way. But I know what it feels like to be judged, to feel like you don't fit in. When I was younger, my family didn't have much either. I lost people I loved. And for a long time, I felt like I was just surviving. Mary's gaze softened. She had read about his past, about the losses he had suffered. And yet, here he was, using his success to help a complete stranger. Liam perked up. But you're super famous. Doesn't that mean everything gets better? Keanu chuckled, shaking his head. Money and fame don't fix everything, kid. But kindness, that makes the world a little easier to live in. Mary inhaled deeply, his words settling over her like a warm embrace. Then suddenly, there was another knock at the door. Mary and Liam exchanged a puzzled glance before she stood up and walked over, opening the door cautiously. A hesitant figure stood outside, her head slightly bowed, hands nervously clutching her coat. Jessica. Mary's eyes widened. The young cashier looked different from the arrogant, dismissive woman from earlier. Her makeup, once perfect, was now slightly smudged, and her expression wasn't one of superiority, it was of guilt. Jessica swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. Can I talk to you? Keanu stood and stepped beside Mary, his silent presence a steadying force. Mary hesitated for a moment before nodding and stepping aside. Come in. A change of heart. Jessica walked in cautiously, her eyes darting to Keanu before settling on Mary. Liam watched curiously, still clutching his cookies. Jessica took a deep breath, wringing her hands together. I wanted to say I'm sorry, she blurted out, for what I did at the store. Mary remained silent, waiting. Jessica exhaled shakily. I was rude. No, I was cruel. And there's no excuse for that. I got caught up in my own problems, and I took it out on you. Mary studied the young woman. There was no arrogance now, no smugness, just a lost girl standing in front of her, ashamed of her actions. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. I got suspended from work today. My manager said I needed to rethink how I treat people. And honestly, he's right. What I did to you was awful, and I regret it. I know my apology doesn't erase it, but she trailed off, her voice breaking. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. Silence stretched in the small room. Then, to Jessica's shock, Mary reached out and gently took her hands. You made a mistake, Mary said softly, her voice kind. But realizing it and choosing to be better, that's what matters. Jessica sniffled, swiping at her tears. I don't know why you're being so nice to me. Mary smiled gently. Because everyone deserves a second chance. Jessica let out a choked laugh, shaking her head. You're way too nice. Keanu, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. She's kind, he corrected. And kindness changes people. Jessica looked at him, a mixture of embarrassment and gratitude in her gaze. I want to be better. I don't want to be that person anymore. Keanu nodded approvingly. Then don't be. Jessica inhaled deeply. I'll try. She turned back to Mary. Can I do anything for you to make up for today? Mary squeezed her hands. Just pay it forward. Help someone else when they need it. Jessica nodded, a small but genuine smile forming on her lips. I will. She turned to Liam, who had been watching the whole thing. "Hey, kid, I'm really sorry for what I said to your grandma. She's an amazing lady." Liam beamed. "I know, and I forgive you." Jessica laughed softly. "Thanks, buddy." As she turned to leave, Keanu walked her to the door. "One more thing," he said. Jessica looked up. "Yeah. Being kind doesn't just help others. It helps you too." Jessica nodded thoughtfully. "I think I'm starting to understand that." With one last grateful glance at Mary, she stepped outside, a different person than when she had walked in. A full circle moment. As Mary closed the door, she let out a long breath. She looked at Keanu, her heart full. "You didn't just help me today. You changed her too." Keanu smiled, his eyes warm. "Sometimes, all it takes is a push in the right direction." Liam grinned. "This is the best day ever." Mary chuckled, ruffling his hair. "It certainly is a memorable one." Keanu clapped a hand on Liam's shoulder. "I think you're gonna grow up to be someone who spreads kindness, kid." Liam puffed out his chest. "I wanna be just like you." Keanu laughed. "Then you're already on the right path." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the room, Mary realized that what had started as a moment of humiliation had turned into something beautiful, a lesson in kindness, forgiveness, and the unexpected ways life had of bringing people together. And as she watched Liam excitedly tell the story for the 10th time, her heart swelled with hope. Because kindness wasn't just an action. It was a ripple that kept going, changing everything in its path. The ripple grows. The night had settled comfortably over the small apartment, the golden glow of the streetlights casting soft shadows through the window. Inside, Mary sat with her hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea, her heart still racing from the day's events. Liam had finally settled down on the couch, though the box of cookies Keanu had given him remained within arm's reach, as if he feared they might disappear. Across from her, Keanu sat with a quiet ease, his expression thoughtful. The weight of the moment was still present, lingering between them like an unfinished sentence. Mary exhaled slowly. "I still can't believe all that happened today." Keanu chuckled. "Neither can I, to be honest." She studied him, her gaze soft but curious. "Why did you step in back at the store? Most people would have just watched and moved on." Keanu leaned back, his hands clasped together as he considered her question. "Because I've been on the other side of that moment before. I know what it feels like to be struggling while the world just keeps moving, indifferent." His voice was calm, but there was an undertone of something deeper, something personal. Mary nodded, understanding more than words could express. Not many people would use their position to help someone they don't know. Keanu shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips. "That's the thing, though. We do know each other. Maybe not by name, but by experience, by struggle. We're all just trying to get by in this world, and if we can make it a little easier for someone else, why wouldn't we?" Mary felt the truth in his words settle deep within her. In all her years, she had learned that kindness wasn't about grand gestures. It was about choosing to see people, to truly see them. Just then, Liam piped up from the couch. "Grandma, can we do something nice for someone too?" Mary turned to him, surprised. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Liam sat up, hugging the cookie box to his chest. "Keanu helped us, and Jessica said she was gonna be better. But maybe we can help someone too. Like, pass it on." Keanu grinned at the boy's enthusiasm. "That's a great idea, kid." Mary hesitated. She had always tried to help where she could, but their resources were so limited. "I'm not sure how, Liam." Liam thought hard for a moment before his face lit up. "I know. We can make cookies and give them to people who look sad." Mary blinked, caught off guard by the simplicity and brilliance of his suggestion. Keanu chuckled. "That might be the best idea I've heard all day." Mary smiled, running a gentle hand through Liam's hair. "Then I suppose we'll need to buy some flour tomorrow." Liam cheered, and just like that, A new plan was set in motion. The next day, a small bakery with a big heart. True to their word, Mary and Liam spent the following morning baking cookies in their tiny kitchen. The smell of warm chocolate filled the air as the two of them worked side by side. Mary kneaded dough while Liam carefully placed chocolate chips into each batch, his tongue poking out in concentration. Keanu had stayed the night at a nearby hotel, but he returned early, sleeves rolled up, ready to help. Liam was practically vibrating with excitement as they packed the cookies into small paper bags. Who do we give them to first? Mary wiped her hands on a towel and thought for a moment. The park. Liam nodded, as if it was the most obvious answer in the world. There are lots of people there. Some of them might be sad. Keanu smiled as he helped carry the bags. Then let's go cheer them up. Spreading kindness, one cookie at a time. At the park, the air was crisp with the scent of autumn leaves. Families bustled around, children played near the swings, and elderly couples sat on benches, watching the world move past them. Mary, Liam, and Keanu walked through the park, offering cookies to strangers. At first, people hesitated, confused by the unexpected generosity. For free? A tired-looking man asked, eyeing the bag Liam held out to him. Liam beamed. Yep, just because. The man chuckled, shaking his head in disbelief before taking the bag. Well, I won't say no to that. Thank you, little guy. The boy practically glowed with pride. As they continued, they came across a young woman sitting alone on a bench, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. Her shoulders were hunched, and her eyes held a sadness that Mary recognized all too well. Without hesitation, Liam walked up to her, offering a bag. You look like you need a cookie. The woman blinked in surprise, looking down at the boy before shifting her gaze to Mary and Keanu, who stood a few steps behind him. A cookie, she repeated. Liam nodded seriously. Cookies make everything better. The woman let out a small, surprised laugh before accepting the bag. Well, I guess I could use a little better today. Mary sat down beside her. Rough morning. The woman exhaled, the weight of whatever burden she carried evident in her posture. Rough year, if I'm being honest. Mary nodded, understanding. Sometimes, all it takes is one kind moment to remind us that things can get better. The woman stared at her for a moment before glancing at the cookie bag in her lap. She opened it, took a bite, and to Mary's surprise, tears welled in her eyes. This tastes just like the cookies my grandmother used to make, she whispered. Mary reached out, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. Then consider this a reminder that she's still with you. The woman let out a shaky laugh. You have no idea how much I needed this today. Liam grinned. See, cookies do make everything better. Keanu, who had been watching the interaction quietly, finally spoke. Sometimes the smallest kindness means the most. The woman wiped at her eyes, nodding. Thank you, all of you. As they walked away, Liam looked up at his grandmother. Did we do a good job, Grandma? Mary smiled, her heart full. The best job, sweetheart. Keanu placed a hand on Liam's shoulder. You just made someone's day a little brighter. That's more powerful than you know. A call that changes everything. Later that evening, as Mary settled down at home, her phone rang. She answered, surprised to hear Jessica's voice on the other end. Mary, Jessica said, her voice excited. You're not gonna believe this. The manager called me today. He said someone big, talked to the store's corporate office about what happened. Mary's brows furrowed. What do you mean? Jessica took a deep breath. They're making changes. They're starting a community program to support struggling customers. Discounts for seniors, a pay-it-forward system. Things to actually help people instead of shame them. Mary's breath caught in her throat. Keanu, she whispered. Jessica laughed. I don't know how he did it, but he did. Mary turned to look at Keanu, who sat across from her with a knowing smile. You never stop, do you? She murmured. Keanu shrugged. Why would I? Tears welled in her eyes as she realized this wasn't just about a moment in a grocery store. This was about change. And it had only just begun. A movement begins. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains of Mary's small apartment, casting golden streaks across the wooden floor. She stood by the window, holding her cup of tea, reflecting on the phone call from Jessica the night before, a community program to help struggling customers. She turned to look at Keanu, who was casually sipping his own tea, sitting at the kitchen table with Liam, who was busy sketching superheroes on a notepad. You really went to corporate about the store? Mary asked, narrowing her eyes playfully. Keanu smirked, setting his cup down. I might have made a few calls. Mary shook her head in disbelief. I don't even know how to thank you. Keanu leaned forward, his expression sincere. You don't have to. The way I see it, no one should feel ashamed just because they're struggling. That store had a problem, and now they're actually doing something about it. Liam, still engrossed in his drawing, suddenly piped up. Does this mean no one will be mean to Grandma at the store anymore? Keanu smiled. That's the idea, kid. Mary exhaled slowly, shaking her head in wonder. I never imagined something like this would happen. A whole program, just because of one moment. Keanu leaned back, his gaze steady. That's how change happens, Mary. One moment. One person willing to speak up. Mary swallowed, her emotions threatening to spill over again. Just then, Liam gasped, holding up his drawing. Look, I made a superhero version of you, Mr. Keanu. Keanu laughed as he took the paper. The drawing was of a tall figure with a black trench coat, sunglasses, and a cape, holding a bag of groceries in one hand and a box of cookies in the other. Above the character's head, Liam had written in large, bold letters, "The kind in ES warrior." Keanu chuckled, clearly touched. This might be my favorite fan art ever. Liam beamed. You are a superhero. You helped Grandma, and now you're helping even more people. Mary chuckled, ruffling Liam's hair. I think you helped too, sweetheart. Liam nodded proudly. Yeah, we gave people cookies. That was awesome. Keanu grinned, and I have a feeling we're just getting started. A knock that changes everything. Before Mary could respond, a knock sounded at the door. Frowning, she set down her tea and walked over, opening it cautiously. To her surprise, a woman in a professional navy blue blazer stood there, holding a clipboard. Behind her stood a man in a crisp button-down shirt, wearing a lanyard that read Community Outreach Coordinator. Mrs. Barrett, the woman asked with a polite smile. Mary hesitated. Yes. The woman extended her hand. I'm Claire Simmons, and this is my colleague, David Chan. We're from the local outreach board. Mary blinked, confused. What can I do for you? Claire glanced behind Mary, spotting Keanu in the background. Actually, we were hoping to talk to all of you. Mary stepped aside, allowing them in. Keanu and Liam looked up in curiosity as Claire and David took a seat at the table. David smiled warmly. We heard about what happened at the grocery store. It's been all over the community boards. Mary's stomach twisted. Oh dear. Claire chuckled. Don't worry, it's a good thing. People were moved by how Keanu stepped in and by how you handled the situation with grace. But what really caught our attention was what you and your grandson did afterward, giving out cookies at the park. Mary's brows furrowed. That was just something small. David shook his head. It wasn't small at all. People noticed. And now, we've had dozens of people reaching out, asking how they can help. Mary's mouth fell open. Help. Claire nodded, excitement shining in her eyes. Your story has started something bigger. We want to expand on what you did, turn it into a real community project. Keanu leaned forward, intrigued. What kind of project? Claire smiled. A kindness initiative. a program where volunteers can sign up to distribute small acts of kindness, whether it's paying for a struggling person's groceries, handing out free meals, or even something as simple as leaving a note of encouragement. People want to be part of something positive. Mary was speechless. David turned to Liam. "And we want to name it after your idea, kid." Liam tilted his head. "My idea." David held up a folder. Inside was a rough draft of a flyer, with bold letters across the top. "The Kindness Warrior Project." Liam gasped. "That's my superhero name for Mr. Keanu." Claire chuckled. "And now, it's going to be a real program." Mary covered her mouth, tears welling up. "I don't know what to say." Keanu smiled. "Say yes." David nodded. "We'll handle all the logistics, but we'd love for you and Liam to be part of it. You started this, after all." Liam practically vibrated with excitement. "Grandma, we have to do it." Mary let out a soft laugh, wiping her eyes. "How could I say no?" Claire grinned. "Then welcome to the team." Keanu clapped Liam on the back. "Looks like you're officially a real-life superhero, buddy." Liam's eyes shone with pride. "I'm a Kindness Warrior." The first mission. A week later, the Kindness Warrior Project officially launched. Volunteers poured in, people of all ages who wanted to be part of something bigger. The local grocery store, inspired by the movement, set up a pay-it-forward fund where customers could donate extra money to help cover groceries for those in need. Restaurants joined in, offering suspended meals for the hungry. Schools started kindness clubs. And at the center of it all were Mary and Liam, leading the charge with their cookies, their warm smiles, and their determination to show the world that kindness was a force more powerful than anyone realized. And standing right beside them was Keanu Reeves. No cameras, no press, just a man who believed in doing the right thing. As they handed out their first batch of cookies under the official Kindness Warrior Project banner, Liam looked up at Keanu with a grin. "Mr. Keanu." "Yeah, kid. This is even better than being in the movies." Keanu chuckled, ruffling Liam's hair. "You know what, buddy? I think you're right." Mary looked out at the bustling group of volunteers, her heart full. One moment in a grocery store, one act of kindness, and now, a movement that would change lives. Because in the end, it was never about fame, or money, or recognition. It was about people. It was about seeing each other, and choosing, every single day, to be kind. The Kindness Revolution. The morning air was crisp as Mary and Liam arrived at the community center, where the first official gathering of the Kindness Warrior Project was about to take place. The once quiet building was now buzzing with excitement. Volunteers, families, and even strangers had gathered, eager to be part of something bigger than themselves. Mary had never seen anything like it. The grocery store scandal had gone viral. News outlets picked up the story of how Keanu Reeves had stood up for an elderly woman being humiliated at the checkout line. But what truly captivated people was what followed, the way a single act of kindness had sparked a movement. Now, standing before a crowd of volunteers, Mary felt the weight of the moment sink in. Liam tugged on her sleeve, his face full of wonder. "Grandma, look how many people came." Keanu, standing beside them, smiled. "That's the power of kindness, kid. It spreads." The community center had transformed overnight. Posters hung on the walls, displaying messages like "Kindness is free" and "Be the reason someone smiles today." A long table had been set up in the center, covered with stacks of food bags, handwritten notes of encouragement, and baskets filled with cookies, each package carefully sealed with the Kindness Warrior Project logo. Claire Simmons, the outreach director, stepped up onto a small stage. She adjusted the microphone, clearing her throat as the room quieted. First of all, she began, her voice warm. "Thank you. Thank you to every single person who showed up today, who heard this story and decided to be part of something bigger. A few weeks ago, this movement didn't exist. It started with one moment, one person standing up for another. And now, it's turning into something that will touch countless lives. A soft wave of murmurs spread through the crowd as people nodded. Claire turned to Mary, her smile kind. "Mary, would you like to say a few words?" Mary's breath caught in her throat. She had never been one for public speaking, but as she looked out over the crowd, she realized that these weren't strangers anymore. They were people who believed in the same things she did. Stepping forward, she took a deep breath. "I never imagined any of this," she admitted, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "I've lived a long life, and I've seen a lot of hardship. I know what it feels like to struggle, to wonder if anyone sees you." The room was silent, hanging on to her every word. "What happened at that grocery store was painful," she continued, "but it reminded me of something important. Kindness is always a choice, and sometimes it takes just one person to remind the world that we all matter." She turned to Keanu, her eyes warm with gratitude. "That day, I was lucky to have someone like Keanu stand up for me. But there are so many people out there who don't have that kind of luck. That's why we're here today, because no one should feel invisible." Applause rippled through the crowd, growing louder and stronger. Liam, unable to contain his excitement, threw his arms up. "Let's give everyone cookies." Laughter rang out as Claire stepped forward again. "All right, warriors, today is about action. We have teams ready to distribute meals, supplies, and kindness packages across the city. Whether it's helping at a shelter, covering someone's groceries, or just offering a smile, we're here to show the world what kindness looks like." A wave of cheers erupted, and just like that, the first mission of the Kindness Warrior Project began. The city feels the change. Mary and Liam worked side by side with Keanu, handing out meals at a local shelter. As people came forward, hesitant but hopeful, Mary saw something she hadn't seen in years: connection. An elderly man, his clothes tattered, clutched his food bag with shaking hands. You don't want anything in return." Mary smiled gently. "Just a promise." The man blinked. "A promise. That when you can, you'll help someone else." His lips quivered before he nodded, his eyes misty. "I will." Nearby, Liam excitedly handed out cookies, chatting with each person as if they were old friends. A little girl, no older than 5, took a bite and gasped, "It tastes like home." Keanu knelt beside her, his expression soft. "That's the best kind of food, huh?" She nodded vigorously. As the day stretched on, news of the Kindness Warrior Project spread like wildfire. People who had never spoken up before suddenly found their voices. Cashiers started treating customers with more patience, strangers paid for each other's meals, and the ripple of kindness expanded beyond anything they had imagined. But the real surprise came when a black SUV pulled up near the shelter. A man in a suit stepped out, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd. He made his way toward Mary, Liam, and Keanu, his presence commanding attention. Claire approached cautiously. "Can we help you, sir?" The man smiled, extending his hand. "My name is Mark Russell. I represent a few major business owners in the city. We heard about what's happening here, and..." He gestured to the crowd. "We want in." Mary blinked. "In?" Mark nodded. "We want to help fund the Kindness Warrior Project. We've seen what it's done in just a few weeks, and we believe it can go even further. We're prepared to provide grants, resources, and facilities to make sure this movement keeps growing." Liam's mouth fell open. "You mean we see and give out EVM more COKs?" Mark chuckled. "That, and a whole lot more." Mary looked at Keanu, who smiled knowingly. "Looks like kindness isn't just spreading," he said. "It's unstoppable now. A legacy of kindness." In the weeks that followed, the Kindness Warrior Project exploded beyond anything Mary or Liam had ever dreamed. Grocery stores across the city adopted pay-it-forward programs. Shelters and food banks received more funding than ever before. Schools began teaching kindness initiatives in classrooms. And people Ordinary, everyday people started seeing each other again. Mary's once quiet life had transformed into something she never expected. She became a pillar of the movement, her story inspiring thousands. One evening, as she sat in her kitchen, she watched Liam and Keanu laughing together as they baked another batch of cookies. She had always believed that life was about survival. But now, she knew the truth. Life was about connection, about choosing to be kind. And thanks to one moment in a grocery store, thanks to one person standing up, a revolution had begun. As she sipped her tea, she smiled. Because the world had just become a little bit brighter. The world takes notice. The morning light filtered through the kitchen window as Mary stirred her tea, the rhythmic clinking of the spoon against the porcelain mug filling the air. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind. What had started as a humiliating moment in a grocery store had turned into something much bigger than she ever could have imagined. The Kindness Warrior Project had exploded across the city, spreading like wildfire to neighboring towns, and even gaining national attention. What was once a small effort to bring smiles to a few faces had now turned into a movement. Mary set her mug down and turned to the living room, where Liam sat cross-legged on the floor, intently watching the TV. Keanu sat on the couch beside him, casually sipping coffee, dressed in his usual understated style. Black t-shirt, jeans, and an easygoing smile. "Grandma, look!" Liam pointed excitedly at the screen. Mary walked over just in time to see a well-dressed news anchor holding up a flyer, the very same one that read the Kindness Warrior Project in bold letters. Behind her, images flashed on the screen. Volunteers handing out meals, children writing encouragement notes, strangers helping strangers. What started as a small act of kindness has now become a nationwide movement, the anchor reported. From grocery stores setting up pay-it-forward systems to entire schools adopting kindness initiatives, this project is proving that even the simplest acts can create lasting change. And at the heart of it all, a grandmother, her grandson, and a Hollywood star who decided to stand up when it mattered most. Mary's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my goodness." Liam bounced in his seat. "We are a famous grandmère." Keanu chuckled. "Not famous, buddy. Just noticed." The news segment continued, shifting to an interview with Claire Simmons, the outreach director. "What makes this movement so special," Claire explained, "is that it isn't about money or publicity. It's about people. The idea that anyone, no matter their background, can choose to be kind. And thanks to Mary and Liam, we're seeing that kindness doesn't just spread, it multiplies." The camera cut to Jessica, the cashier from the grocery store, now volunteering at a food pantry, handing out meals with a soft, humbled smile. "I was the one who hurt Mary that day," Jessica admitted. "But because of what happened, I realized how much I needed to change. And now, I'm part of something that's actually making a difference." Mary's heart swelled with emotion. Keanu gave her a knowing look. "Still think what you did was small?" Mary wiped her eyes, shaking her head with a laugh. "Not anymore." Liam turned to Keanu, grinning. "What do we do now, Mr. Keanu?" Keanu set his coffee down, stretching his arms. "Well, kid, what do superheroes do after they save the day?" Liam gasped dramatically. "They go and more adventurous." Keanu laughed. "Exactly." Mary chuckled, shaking her head. "I don't know how much more adventure I can handle." Keanu leaned back against the couch. "Well, you might want to brace yourself, because I got a call last night." Mary raised an eyebrow. "A call?" Keanu's smile widened. "From the Ellen Show." Silence. Liam's mouth fell open. "The ELENSHO, like on TV." Keanu nodded. "She wants to have you both on as guests. She heard about what happened, and she wants to share your story." Mary's breath hitched. "Oh dear." Keanu grinned. "Oh yes. From small acts to national recognition. 2 weeks later, Mary and Liam found themselves stepping into the bright, bustling studios of the Ellen DeGeneres Show. Mary had never imagined in her wildest dreams that she'd ever be in a place like this, let alone because of something she had been a part of. She squeezed Liam's hand as they were led backstage, nerves creeping into her chest. Keanu, walking beside them, gave her a reassuring smile. "You'll be great." Liam, however, was practically vibrating with excitement. "Do you think she'll give us prizes? She always gives prizes." Mary chuckled. "Liam, we're not here for prizes." Liam tilted his head. "I mean, but if she does." Keanu laughed, ruffling his hair. "Let's just see what happens, buddy." Soon, the stagehand gave them the cue, and they stepped out to a thunderous standing ovation. Mary's heart nearly stopped as the energy of the crowd hit her. Cheers, applause, even signs with #KindnessWarriorProject written across them. Ellen stood in the center of the stage, clapping with an enormous smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," she called out, "give it up for the Mary Barrett, the incredible Liam. And oh, you might know him, Keanu Reeves." As they sat down, Ellen turned to Mary with a warm expression. "Mary, did you ever think a trip to the grocery store would land you here?" Mary let out a breathless laugh. "Not in a million years." Ellen leaned forward. "Tell me about that day." Mary recounted the story, her voice steady but full of emotion. She told Ellen about counting her coins, about Jessica's cruelty, and about how Keanu had stepped in. But she also spoke about what had come after, how Liam had wanted to pass on the kindness, how the cookies had sparked something bigger, how Jessica had changed, and how a movement had begun. Ellen listened, enraptured. "That is incredible. And Keanu, what made you step in?" Keanu's face was serious as he replied, "Because kindness shouldn't be an exception. It should be the rule. And I knew that if I didn't do something, I'd regret it. No one should be made to feel small just for existing." The audience erupted in cheers. Ellen wiped a tear from her eye. "You all have inspired millions of people, and well, I wanted to do something special for you." Liam practically levitated in his seat. Ellen grinned. "So first, Mary, we know you've been living on a tight budget, and you've spent your life taking care of others. That's why we're giving you a year's worth of free groceries." The audience exploded in applause. Mary gasped, pressing a hand to her chest. Oh my goodness." Ellen wasn't done. "And Liam, since you're basically a superhero now, we got you your very own superhero suit, custom made by the costume designers from Marvel." Liam's soul left his body. "No way." A stage assistant brought out a small box, and when Liam opened it, there it was, a sleek, kid-sized superhero costume with a bold K on the chest, complete with a cape that read "Kindness Warrior." Liam screamed in joy. "I am a real superhero now." The crowd laughed, and Ellen turned to Keanu. "And Keanu, well, you don't need anything. You're just Keanu." Keanu grinned. "I'm good." Ellen clapped her hands together. "One last thing. We're donating $50,000 to the Kindness Warrior Project to keep spreading this movement across the country." Tears welled in Mary's eyes. I don't know what to say." Keanu patted her hand. "Say thank you and get ready, because this is just the beginning." And as the audience cheered, Mary realized he was right. Kindness had started with one moment, but now it was unstoppable.